Hello, everybody. It's Larry Kotlikoff back with Economics Matters, the podcast. I'm delighted to have a really special guest today, Howard Tullman. I'm going to riff off of his Wikipedia bio here and then ask him to fill in the gaps, uh, but go beyond that and tell us about his entire career because it's so fascinating. Howard's an American serial entrepreneur, a venture capitalist of the first order, an educator, writer, lecturer, art collector, apparently an amazing art collector, and a contributor to the Art Institute in Chicago in the sense of interacting, of working with them, from what I gather. He's the former executive director of the Ed Kaplan Family Institute for Innovation and Tech Entrepreneurship at Illinois Tech in Chicago. He's the first university professor at Illinois Tech. He's the former CEO of 1871, which I'll have to explain these dates for us. But I understand that's a technology firm. He's the current managing partner of, get this with the initials, the letters here, or the numbers, G2T3V LLC.
Very good. Very
They
good.
must all mean something, each of those things. And he's the current general managing partner of Chicago High-Tech Investment Partners, LLC, both early stage venture capital funds based in Chicago. Now, Howard was born in St. Louis in 1945, so he's a young guy like me. He's raised in a family of 8. His dad was an apparel salesman, kind of like my dad, and got a big family, six brothers and sisters all together. But by age 10, according to the Wikipedia entry here, he was running a candy racket, which I'm not sure whether that was legal or illegal, and he had a magic performance business. He did this in his free time. And he went to college at Northwestern, studied math and economics. I like that. That feels good to me as an economist. He went on to receive his JD from Northwestern School of Law. It's one of the top law schools in the country. He graduated with honors, and he was elected during his time at Northwestern to the Order of the Coif. This sounds like some kind of British investiture or something, British organization, but it's
no wig was involved.
Yeah, no wig was involved, but it's an honorific society of lawyers, and I guess young lawyers who do well in law school. He was served as chairman of the editors of the Law Review. That's really something. To become an editor of a law review at any law school is a big deal. To become the chairman, kind of the head editor of all the editors, is the biggest big deal if you're going to law school. He served as Ford Foundation Fellow and developed with James Thompson, former governor of Illinois, a National Ford Foundation program for the study of criminal law. So in his main time, Howard practiced law from 1970 through 1980. But then on the side, he was involved in large class actions cases and Chapter 11 bankruptcy cases. And in 1974, he was admitted on a special petition to the bar of the U.S. Supreme Court. So he was honored by the Supreme Court. He got their attention as well. But then he retired from law to found CCC Information Services. So here we have, so all this is about kind of Howard's career, education and career, but he's this entrepreneur, he's this venture capitalist, but he's also kind of a Renaissance man. He has a very large email list, from what I understand. He writes to people about all kinds of issues about the economy and about policy, and he's also heavily involved in the arts. So I'm going to stop here. Howard, fill in the gaps.
Sure. Well,
And Howard Tullman,
uh,
becoming from being a 6 pounder or whatever you were
well,
size wise when you were born.
well, thank you for having me. And as this painful introduction has represented, we don't have enough hours in the day to go through my life, but it's largely organizable, turns out, in chunks of a decade or so. So the first decade was, in fact, as a federal trial lawyer, and I was very interested in the administrative side of that business for whatever reason, the systems and the controls and the way all the information was organized. And so over the years, that became really an area that I specialized in. And that meant running, as you said, huge class actions, where you'd have 52,000 claimants and Chapter 11 proceedings where you'd be reorganizing, thousands and thousands of acres of development all over the country for big real estate investment trusts and things like that. And ultimately, what I came away with, and this was, by the way, literally as computers became a tool in the legal profession, in every profession, and it was also midstream 1975. The federal rules of civil procedure became applicable to bankruptcy courts. And so it was a very interesting shift, because all of a sudden, what used to be all about repossessing refrigerators turned out to be tools that could be used by the big banks, all of whom were my clients. As I said, the big real estate investment trusts, all of the financial institutions became aware of Chapter 11 in particular as a reorganizing structure, and the bankruptcy rules and things like that. So I did that, but what I discovered was in any given case, whether you won or lost, that had a lot to do with what the judge had for breakfast and the quality of the judge and a variety of other things. The person who always got paid was the administrator. So I focused on being the administrator. And I was appointed a special master all over the United States in various cases. And it was interesting because in 1975, I was like 5 years out of law school. And I was the person organizing and giving direction to the most senior partners in the fanciest law firms in New York and in Washington and in California. This would be Cleary Gottlieb. This would be Weisbeck and Greer. This would be all of the Cravath, all of these places. And it was sort of funny because when I would go visit these law firms, I would say, I went to law school with a guy. And I'd be sitting in the office of the senior partner, and I'd say his name was whatever. And they'd say, I think we have a guy named that, but he's probably in the bowels of the firm and probably has another 5 years of shuffling papers before he would ever rise to a partnership and be someone that I would actually interact with. So it was a way to leapfrog a lot of years of paying dues, but also it was really interesting to me, and it was all about data. So come 1980, I discover, as I said, that the most productive part of and the most interesting part to me was organizing the information and managing these complex matters. And so in 1980, I retired and started the first of many companies. Today, that company is about 43 years old. It's about $3 billion worth of a company and has about 6,000 employees. And it provides the information for the insurance industry if a car is lost or stolen. So it's been very successful, and it's become the way that business is done in the auto insurance industry. And what's very sort of full circle is 30 years later, I'm now a director of a company called Snapsheet. And Snapsheet is a new company, I say new, 10 years old, which uses, instead of sending an adjuster out, as everybody's had the experience of having one of these insurance guys come out and look at your car, and it takes him 3 days, and he tells you that your car doesn't look that bad and all this wonderful stuff. today, Snapsheet, you take 3 pictures from your phone and you send it to us electronically, and we adjust the loss and work for the insurance company and resolve that. So, I've been involved in that industry, the automobile industry, for 50 plus years, and each sort of next business or each next step was sort of an extension of some of the same idea, that if you could take information that had been historic, had been sort of antiquated, and was traditional information, and turn that into real-time data, real-time information that could be something you could operate on. And in the context of stocks, this obviously is the difference between a stock table with the history of a stock over the last umpteen years and current trading information, what the stock is selling for today. So long story short, every time we pushed from historic information to real-time information, we added a multiple of value. So in the insurance industry, before my company began, you would get a book that was published 8 times a year, and it would tell you the theoretical value of cars. And that book cost about $40 a year for an 8-book subscription. We charged $40 every single time someone asked us for the real-time information related to a car's value. And that was the measure of a multi-million-dollar, business that began. And it was more accurate, and it was, clearer, and it was documented. And
Do you think it was going to be a $40 million, I mean, a $1 billion business or multi-billion-dollar business at the time you started out with this?
Did I think it was going to be?
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because I thought that the changes that we were making would be immediately obvious and very appealing to our clients. And our clients were the top 10 insurance companies in the world. And I would say to them, we can eliminate fraud, we can improve the speed of your settlement process, we can make sure the calculations are accurate, and we can save you money because we won't be guessing what the value would be. We'll actually able to link it to comparable cars. So by the way, the long story short, the answer was they didn't care. They were like, we're fat, we're happy. We don't want to fire a bunch of these people that work for us now. And again, 50 years later, COVID comes along, and we are seeing right now a shift in the insurance industry where all of these middle layer of management, all of these adjusters, all these people who let them go home during COVID, they are not asking back. I mean, this is their dream come true. They're shedding decades of accumulated personnel, infrastructure, and everything else relating to that. Because they are basically now doing it with technology. So it's astonishing, because they used to say we're a company firm, we can't fire people, we can't do any of these kinds of things. And lo and behold, that persisted for 20 or 30 years. COVID came along, everyone went home, and they are basically attriting tens of thousands of these adjusters, this whole level of
this raises a couple of questions just on this particular company, because it sounds like you have a zillion of them, but here you are, somehow you realize that this whole process of getting your car valued is taking too long, too much human, too many hours that are expensive, and you come up with this idea, and then you take it to the insurance companies. And maybe you had connections to the top, or maybe you didn't. But anyway, you had to try and fight your way to find somebody to talk to, and then they turn you down, which is like the typical experience that an entrepreneur who's got a great product would face with American corporations, which is, it works for us. So we don't want to upset my golf partner.
For sure. Every one of those stories. In fact, we called it, we had a big sign that said it's only a no for now, which meant you had to go back like 100 more times in order to turn that into a yes.
So, I got to say, I have a 30-year company that I've been trying to market much better financial planning software. And nobody, it's tough to get a Morgan Stanley to pay attention although we're starting now to start listening, but or at least having meetings. So I know what that's like, but how do you actually break through in this particular case you're talking about to become successful if the big guys are saying forget it, and they're the best customers for you, right? So
Well, the answer was, first of all, you need a champion or a bunch of champions, and you go bottom up. You have to convince, because nothing works top down in these big institutions. I mean, they'll sabotage it, they'll kill it a million different ways. So you have to go bottom up. You have to convince the adjusters and the managers before you get to the concrete layer that this makes sense for them. But what we really did is we went right around these people. We went to the regulators and we said, we're a new source of information, a new way of doing business, and you should regulate us. And so these various state regulators are like, who are you? What in the world? Why are you here? We said, well, you don't understand. We are a new database. We have current information, and you're going to want to regulate us because State Farm and Allstate and all these companies are going to be using us to value losses, and that's what you regulate. So they were like, well, we think we only regulate insurance companies. We don't really understand what you're talking about. But we persisted. And lo and behold, in a fairly short order, and this is really interesting because you can't audit a database. I mean, you could if you had your entire life, but basically you can't audit a database. And so these insurance companies, we would go to the regulators and we would say, by the way, we'll ship you the database on a quarterly basis, and you can audit it. And so after the first, 500 reams of paper arrived, which was the data on 40 million cars or something like that, they said, we'll call you. we'll take your word for it. But they did all give us a letter. And this letter said that if they use your system, then we won't look behind it. We won't, we won't audit them. And by the way, those guys the regulators lived for a gotcha. They lived for finding 5 files among 10,000 files that Allstate had messed up the math on, and they would find them, or they would, this was how they justified their existence. So all of a sudden now we went to the insurance companies and we said, look, this is like a protective blanket. You put this you laminate this and put this under your pillow because you will sleep so well, because when the insurance auditors come in, you'll just show them this piece of paper and say, you use the CCC system.
Well, so this was kind of a combination of your thinking through the, the kind of legal issues or the auditing issues, the accounting issues, the regulatory, and then you said, well, this is the way to get them super interested because they have to. That's quite interesting. Tell us about the initials for these companies it was the 1875 company. What is it called?
1871. So 1871 was the year of the Chicago fire, and only a moron would name their new business after the Chicago fire. The idea, though, was that it would precipitate conversations. And the truth is that following the Chicago fire was an enormous period of rebirth, of innovation, of excitement. The Ferris wheel was invented, the Tootsie Roll was invented, the Twinkie was invented. So our story was basically, look, we are, positioned to bring to the city of Chicago, really to the entire, country, a new wave of innovation based on technology. We're building a hub for digital innovation for new startup businesses, and so we're calling it 1871. And so that's where that name came from.
So you start a technology hub, and then you take some kind of an equity position in these different companies.
This was like preferring one of your kids to the others. We had venture capital companies with us. We had universities with us. We had 500 startups with us, but we were not in a position to create a fund on behalf of the enterprise that could pick and choose between the players. So we stepped back from that part. We were the landlord. We were the sort of the person who brought everybody together and managed all the serendipitous connections, but we
And
did
this
not.
year was what year?
This
What year was this?
18, I would say about let me just think back, 2014 or so. Yeah.
And so was this the first technology hub in?
It was the largest. It was number one in the world, and it was maybe it wasn't the first, but it was the first on this scale, and it would never have existed, interestingly enough, without the financial support of J.B. Pritzker, who is now the governor of Illinois, and wasted no time bragging about this for all the ensuing time until he became the governor. And by the way, Rahm Emanuel, who's now the ambassador to Japan, Rahm was the mayor at the time, and he also was very happy to have us be the number one tech incubator in the world. So
where's this physically located? Is this a big?
Well, it was located in the Merchandise Mart in Chicago. The Mart had some of the biggest floor plates because it used to be it was a place for showrooms. And if you were trying to manage the collisions of all these different businesses and all these different people, again, pre-COVID, I mean, post-COVID, complete nightmare. But pre-COVID, you wanted a flat, open place where hundreds of companies could sit at desks and cubicles in different little office spaces and where they could interact. And honest to God, that was as much a source of innovation and learning as anything else you could ever engineer. I mean, just the collision, somebody would see a solution in retail and move that to medicine would be a good example.
Did you do anything to kind of force these people to talk to each other? Because
no,
this is it certainly entered into the world of economic theory that it's kind of agglomeration effects of people, why cities prosper and grow more rapidly than the rest of the country, because they're bringing the ideas together and the ideas are connecting and
well, the ideas, the people. Look, we had three amazing things going on. Companies would abandon their ideas all day long, okay, and their employees would go work for other companies that were right there. I mean, it was like a built-in, oh my God, they're not doing that, but he's one of the best programmers that we've met. Let's pull him into our operation.
people were trying to
it wasn't cannibalizing, but I mean, it was clearly there were opportunities to steal. And I say this all the time. I mean, the best ideas are not necessarily invented out of whole cloth. They're copied, they're stolen, and so there was a fair amount of that going on.
The employees had an incentive to meet people. It wasn't so much the owners had an incentive to meet the other owners, but the employees, the programmers.
Totally. When I was in the music business, which was sometime in the course of all this ugly history, and sort of the music business was really in. I did all the music sites, so I did RollingStone.com and Downbeat Jazz and The Source and a little company called Tunes.com, which turned out to be very fortuitous. And when I was in the music business, this was another one of these things where I coined the phrase, don't send a man to do a boy's job. And what we discovered was we would go and call on Tommy Mottola, the head of Sony. We would go and call on, various people that were big deals at these record companies, Warner Brothers, Bertelsmann. But the truth was that wasn't where the music industry was being radically changed. It was being changed at raves that were in the middle of the night. It was being totally changed by the internet and all this technology stuff that was at a level that Tommy Mottola not only couldn't see or understand, but he could barely spell. Okay. And so you would just waste your time. And again, it was another one of these executive office suites that were perfectly happy never to change. And lo and behold, as you know, the music business, so a couple of little guys got together and blew up the entire industry. And even today, we're seeing continued waves, whether you look at Spotify or you look at some of these new things, where that industry has never recovered from the changes. And those changes had nothing to do with the management of those businesses that happened because of collisions between the lowest level people.
So let me ask you, underlying this conversation so far is the whole question of like robots and AI. And just to begin with, give everybody a sense of how many companies you've been involved in, if you have actually ever counted in kind of
Well,
organizing or starting or
well,
running.
I've started about 15 or 16 companies from scratch. I've invested in, today we have about 30 businesses that we're currently in our portfolio of investments. And I've been the director or been involved as a investor participant in maybe another dozen, maybe 40 or 50 companies.
And so currently you still are kind of involved in 50 companies,
Yeah.
one way or the other?
Yeah.
And you have no problem keeping that everything?
No, I have a lot of problems keeping it, but the good news is I have a lot of good people. They respect what I can contribute, and basically I try not to get in their way, and I try to keep them also from running off the cliff. The biggest issue we're facing right now across the board, and it's funny because everything we've said to date in this conversation has been about collision and serendipity. And the absolute nightmare for corporate culture, for startups and everything else is work from home. It's having a remote workforce, which makes it almost impossible to build a culture. But having said that, of our 20 or 25 most active companies, I would tell you that every single one is engaged in trying to reduce their physical footprint. Every single one is trying to renegotiate their lease, shrink their space, offload infrastructure, offload fixed costs, because everybody went home and everybody discovered that a substantial number of those folks can work from home and work quite successfully, but not culturally.
Right. And so these synergies are potentially dissipating. This has long run implications that you are suggesting may be negative. But then, we're talking about, AI as a term of just, it's, some people think about AI as particular type of technology for building smart machines and robots, or they think about it as robots, but we're talking about replacing humans with code at some level. And we're also thinking about now, they're talking right now about replacing capital, physical capital with code, because you and I are Zooming. We don't have to be physically in your office space. That you could be at home. I don't know, maybe you are at home.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily have to have this office here at Boston University. So tell us your concerns, if you have them, about automation taking over, AI taking over, technology taking over jobs from humans, but also eliminating all these beautiful buildings in your background here in Chicago. If we look out into the future, are they just going to be rundown structures 50 years from now that nobody's occupying? I understand that a good chunk, maybe 30% of office space or 50% of office space in San Francisco is now empty.
Sure. Sure.
What does this portend for?
Well, look, that's like 100 questions rolled into one, conversation. But let me start by saying that what we're seeing with AI right now is compression, and I'm very encouraged by compression, because compression will basically reduce the amount of time and energy that it takes people to do tasks that are redundant, repetitive, boring, you name it, and hopefully free them up to spend their time more productively doing the creative side of all of this work that the machines may never get to. So right now, I'm seeing machine learning, which I much prefer to use rather than AI. And we don't even use AI as artificial intelligence. We call it augmented intelligence, which the first wave of these things will make us better. We'll have more information at hand. We'll have better solutions at hand. So they'll help us do our jobs. And that can be anything from the machines being far better than any radiologist at reviewing x-rays, to JP Morgan just said they eliminated 300,000 hours of lawyers' time in terms of reviewing pro forma documents that are the same documents. I have on my website a chat, agent, and he looks at the 400 articles that I've written over the last 10 years for Inc. magazine, and you can ask him what I would say about this. And the truth is, I use it to remind myself of what I've already said about this stuff, so I don't repeat myself. But I wouldn't accuse that of doing any thinking. It just does a really good job of assembling prior information in a fashion, and it knows, something about grammar and a few things like that. As far as commercial real estate goes, we are definitely screwed, and all of these people that talk about converting downtown office space into residential, I think, are smoking various substances. In part, and here's an interesting thing: there is a cohort that this works for, and the cohort are kids who are fresh out of college, and for the next 5 years are looking for a place to live. And A, they don't cook anyway. B, they basically use their facility for sleeping, if that. And so you could take an office building. One of the two risks of conversion of commercial real estate office space to residential are black iron, which is to say kitchens, and plumbing. And the reason I picked this cohort of kids that are 1 to 5 years out of college is they're used to living in dorms. And so you could take a floor of a big office, you could take a floor of the university and say the Johns are going to be common. There'll be a small kitchen that'll be common, and we'll build you very nice little cubicles that'll be your apartments. And that you could do, because that is not cost prohibitive. Right now, the estimated cost is $500,000 to $600,000 per unit to create a residential unit in a commercial office building. The math will never work.
So, and you're also thinking that even these cubicles won't work for very long if you're having families and you want to have
exactly right. They'll be about 5 or 6 years. I mean, the truth is the bathrooms can even be co-ed. I mean, my daughter went to Vassar many years ago. I was shocked, but she wasn't shocked apparently that the dorms were co-ed. And so this is within their living experience. And frankly, WeWork, if he wasn't insane, WeWork was about to migrate into We Live, and that was very much along these same lines, that they were going to have some common shared facilities, and this life work joinder was going to be reinforced in many respects by his whole vision.
Okay, so do you have a kind of a dystopian view of cities in the future? Do you have a dystopian view? I mean, you said that we can have, the machine learning and blah, blah, blah can unleash our creative side, but not everybody's that creative. Not everybody.
Well, the second thing, if you look at my Wikipedia, you'll see I've created 3 vocational colleges, okay? Because I truly believe that this idea that we look down on vocational education is what'll eventually kill our whole country. Because the truth is, right now, vocational education and training, I mean, I always kid that my car mechanic makes more than, my doctor does these days, and knows more about my car than my doctor does about my, body. But the truth is, there are a whole series of jobs and careers that are never going away. They're never going to disappear. They may be automated, but we need to train those people. And that's a better path to a middle-class living these days than a liberal arts degree or a philosophy PhD or something like that. So we started a school for digital education. We started a school for culinary and hospitality education. I was involved at IIT in the Kaplan Institute that was designed to bolt on people skills to engineers who were completely gear-headed and would come back after a few years to the university and say, they love me in my cubicle, but they don't think I can be successful in management. And that was because nobody ever told them how to talk or sell, or, this is the old joke between a an engineer who is basically inward directed, looks at his shoes when he's talking to you, and one who's outward directed looks at your shoes when he's talking to you. You know, they have yet to figure out how to tell their stories.
So I agree 100%. We only have like 30% of kids actually finishing college. We have, I think 40% of the kids who go to college drop out
Yep.
from these numbers. So and then they drop out with a lot of debt in many cases. So you're spending a whole lifetime. It's the craziest investment going, given that you got a 40% chance of losing everything to begin day
Absolutely.
one.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think that it's a scam. It's the same. Look, home ownership is going away too. I mean, this is another, thing that I think honestly, and I don't want to be totally, dystopian, but I mean, I think that this is the first wave of generations where the prospect of our kids being upwardly socially mobile from us is not clear, not at all clear that they're going to have better economics or a better situation than we have.
So you're kind of a dismal economist underneath it all as well. like, like me, I've been writing, I wrote a book with Scott Burns. He's a famous journalist at the Dallas Morning News. We wrote 3 books, but first was The Coming Generational Storm. This was about the fiscal problems that we were facing. And we wrote this in the, I think, 80s. And then we wrote another one called The Clash of Generations. So on the fiscal side, things look horrific, even if you had no other concerns that you're raising.
Well, we also, look, we also built a business that trained kids in 4th, 5th, and 6th grade to learn financial literacy. And it was critical because that's the point. I mean, by the time they're in high school, if they haven't, if they think that they're not out of money because they still have checks in their checkbook, we have a serious problem. And so we had a focus on teaching them to be entrepreneurs and teaching them a lot about financial information.
Right. So let's talk about some of your other interests in the remaining like 25 minutes here.
Okay.
Let's talk about, you're working, you're an art collector, you've been involved in the art world. How did that take place? But then I want to also kind of pivot to your views about where the country's going. You talked about it a little bit right now, but geopolitically and nationally, politically, you write a lot, very eloquently in your newsletter, in your email, and also in Inc. magazine. Tell us about, but let's start about talking about art and your involvement in the world.
Yeah, the art is really pretty simple. I mean, well, first of all, my wife is an artist, but when I was doing all of this lawyer-like stuff for those first 10 years, a number of my peers were artists, they were musicians, they were creatives, they were athletes, and they weren't financially in a position to do much of anything other than try and make a living. So we started way back then being supportive and buying art, not fancy lithographs from Calder or something, but the art of local artists and people we knew, not exclusively, but and those people in Chicago, they became several waves of very, very successful artists. And then, we expanded to art. My only interest is really in figurative realist, art. And so we got involved with all of the photorealists, and they became enormously successful with the Harry Who, which was a group of Chicago artists that were imagists, and they also have become very successful. So we just had the good fortune to want to do this for reasons that had to do with friendship and giving back and doing things like that, and to have it turn into something that was also financially beneficial. And we've given hundreds of thousands of dollars of art to probably a dozen museums over the years. And my daughter now runs, my youngest daughter runs an art foundation, mostly around music. But that was the art sort of hook. In our companies, which were 100% boring and digital, we also had art on every wall you could imagine. We had murals, we had paintings, and the thought was that people needed to see that there were other ways of excellence, there were other ways of expressing yourself, and things you could get excited about. So that's sort of the art channel. And I was involved, as you said, with actually with the Museum of Contemporary Art. I did projects with Christo, if you remember, before he passed away. Created a multiple with Christo many, many years ago, before he did the project in Central Park and things like that. So that, that was an area. And then in all of the different businesses, excuse me, whether it was music or digital art or these things, or I developed a number of games over the years, computer games, and produced those. I had a chance to sort of inject my 2 cents into that as well, to sort of be involved in the creative part of the process, not simply the financial or the technical part. So
you actually must have been playing computer games yourself, right?
I was I learned about programming at Illinois Institute of Technology, like in 1962, I think it was, roughly, and went back there 50 years later as a university professor. And you probably aren't sure what that means, but let me tell you what that means. It means you have no department head. So I didn't have to report to anyone. I could just teach my classes, which were in entrepreneurship and change management, and I didn't have any administrative responsibilities whatsoever.
But to actually design computer games, you must be pretty much immersed in what's out there.
Yeah, I mean, I did that for a number of years. I mean, we had amazing experiences. Microsoft was my partner, Intel was my partner, all the Hollywood studios I worked with. My favorite story about that was I wanted to do some educational games, and I thought that I should get a brand or a trademark partner, and I thought that Where's Waldo would be a great partner. So I did a number of games, Where's Waldo Geography, Where's Waldo Math, Where's Waldo something else. But I had to go get Waldo. And so I went to London, and the guy who draws Waldo, and the Waldo books, as you obviously know, are 12 pages long, and it takes him a month to draw each
one.
So I went to meet Martin Hansford, and I said, I'm going to build these games that are going to teach kids, and Waldo will be the instructor and help and the illustrator, whatever. And he said, that sounds interesting. When the game is done, come back and show it to me, and I'll tell you whether I approve the way you've represented Waldo. And I'm like, well, let me explain to you that will be $2 million later, and I don't think that's going to do it. So I brought some tissues, and I literally showed him how our illustrators were going to make Waldo, animate, and he agreed. He agreed to, do the project with me.
Oh, that's great. So,
but he's a hermit. I mean, I had to go out to his farm and meet with him. It was very
connecting back
bizarre.
to machine learning. Could machine learning at this point be drawing, basically say, make a new Where's Waldo book?
Oh yeah. If you have not seen it, you should go and look up the latest Google demo. And there's about a 5-minute video where they say to the machine, do this, draw this, what am I doing? They even play the shell game, and the machine guesses where the P is under the 3 cups. And so for sure, they're already into imagery, they're already into music. And this is all coming. I mean, to me, it doesn't have a lot of current application, but it's coming.
Are you worried, as other tech entrepreneurs are, about machine learning taking over the world and destroying us? Is this a concern of yours as well?
I'm not close enough to see these conversations where they say that some of the technology has become sentient. I honestly, I just don't know. I mean, I've been a hardliner of, 40 years ago when I was building computer games, I built a psychiatrist, and I didn't think for 1 minute that that psychiatrist was actually interacting with you. I thought that if you answered some questions, we would have canned responses and statements and things like that. And we were using theories of, behavior to have her respond back to you and give you advice and commentary. But there was no intelligence there. I mean, there was nothing that she was going to leap and say, "Oh, by the way, I think you should kill yourself." So I don't know the answer. I will tell you this: I have no confidence that the government will ever be able to regulate this or control it. So, I mean, the real question is, will the financial controls and will the businesses, in some sense, come to their senses and not let this go so deeply off the charts that we won't be able to figure out what's going on. And by the way, I wrote a piece, today's column in Inc. magazine is about the fact that a huge amount of advertising is now programmatic. And what that means is you have no idea where your ads are showing up. You have no idea of who's seeing the ads. There's no accountability. There's no measurement. We're taking the computer's word for it when we buy X dollars and say, go show it to the right people. 1 in 5 now of those dollars, 1 in 5 of those ads is completely fake. I mean, made for advertising purposes to attract the machine to view it and to position it. And that craziness is just beginning. This is why X/Twitter is blowing up, because the companies that do finally have people looking at the context in which their advertising is being displayed are freaking out. And they're trying to pull that back, and there's no way to pull it back from the systems. You just have to quit. And so it'll be very interesting to see where that ends up.
So tell us where things are going to end up. I mean, you've obviously, you could step back and say, I've done my thing and I'm now going to focus on art or just relaxation, but that's not, obviously you got more energy than a 5-year-old from what I can tell. And you're going to keep at it. Your retirement plan sounds like mine, which is to retire a year after I die.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I would say, and by the way, that's something that COVID brought home, I think, as well, which is that we don't have to organize our lives around our work. We can actually organize our life and then work. And so that's been a huge difference for me. I mean, I see my kids more, I see my pets more, I see my wife more, I spend more time doing things that I enjoy that are somewhat less structured. So I'm encouraged by all that. But look, having said that, I mean, I think we're just at the very, very beginning. I'm completely depressed that Apple will no longer be able to sell for at least a period of time until the licensing is squared away. The new Ultra 2 watch, which is the newest version of the Apple Watch, which has a huge amount of medical capability. And, I'm very committed to this idea. It's a multi-trillion-dollar business that we need to be focusing on what we call 363. 363 is the number of days you aren't in the doctor's office. And so preventative health and, helping us manage our well-being as opposed to managing our illnesses is something that the watch and these kinds of tools are really going to help us do. Whether it's diabetes or any of these different kinds of things. So I'm excited about where technology is headed with respect to medicine. And I'm excited about the prospect that maybe we'll break through on education, but I think medicine might get better before education does. I mean, I'm really not happy about
that. It seems to me if you go to the Department of Education, I would expect at this point in time, they would have classes for electronic classes for from K through 12 on every subject, provided by 5 of the top teachers per subject.
Yep.
All recorded so that we could have digital classrooms where the teacher is going around and the kids have a headset so they're not being disturbed by other kids.
Sure.
And it's half the day is spent through electronic education, which is uniform across the
Yeah.
country.
Yeah.
Rather
And by the
than-
way, with broadband and with the fact, that one of the fantasies is, and this is a fantasy that persists everywhere, is that in many of the underserved areas economically, that the kids aren't connected, and that's complete bullshit. I mean, the kids are totally connected. Somehow they get their hands on a phone. Somehow they get their hands on a game machine, which can be a terminal for exactly the scheme of education that you've talked about. And I've had meetings for years now with Comcast and with broadband providers, in order to talk about programs to provide exactly those kinds of educational resources, because those are not geographically bound in any way, shape, or form. In fact, the program we're working on right now, Illinois has just elected a new Secretary of State after 30 years. He's actually a reasonable human being who understands a little bit about technology. One of the jobs of the Secretary of State, in addition to voting and all kinds of other things and driver's licenses, is he's the chief librarian for the state, 6,400 libraries. So I said to him, what's the plan for the libraries, which are clearly crumbling and dying around us, bricks and mortar? And he said he didn't really have a plan. And I said, well, I have a plan, and I'd like to turn them into safe spaces, after school, highly digital, for learning and for music, you know, and frankly, I can get Apple to be a partner. I can get Intel. I can get Comcast, all these people, if you just get out of the way. And by the way, libraries happen to be pretty well distributed across the entire state. So Illinois has, as I said, 6,400, but Chicago has 85. And so this is a real thing. This is a real prospect that the kids won't go and take out a book anymore. I understand that, but they might take out a little keyboard. They might take out a device that would permit them to read a book digitally, a Kindle or whatever it is. So, the entire New York Public Library is available for free everywhere in the world, pretty much. The material is there. And as you said, if we could get it well taught in an interactive fashion, if we could gamify education, is really what it amounts to. Because these kids, the funny thing is, if a kid fails in math class, they sit him in the corner and say he's a moron. And he will take that to heart and think he's a failure. When we built games, failure is 80% or 90% of the game. And nobody stops. Nobody stops. They start again because they understand that it's an iterative process of getting better. If we could only make education that exciting, we would be in a pretty good position, I think.
That's a marvelous way of putting it. Yeah, I think that's a big hope there. Do you see, Cherry Savage, who introduced me to you, my co-author on this new book about Social Security clawbacks. She's says that you are very, violently, or not violently, but virulently anti-Trump. You're very concerned about the political situation in the country. Do you want to talk about that at all? Is that something you?
Well, I don't even think there's two sides to that conversation. I mean, the guy is, today he's, figured out a complete script that you can match up line by line with anything Hitler said for a few years. And to watch these morons on the Republican side of the House, or Republicans anywhere, trying to defend this guy or explain him away or say he's joking, it's frightening. And it's frightening to me because I thought we were getting to a point where we had enough people that we had control of, sort of the levers of electoral levers. And I understand the Electoral College is horrible and everything else, but now I think that we're in a position where, if you look, not only do they have the Republicans have control of the Supreme Court, and we're going to know within 45 days, we're going to know whether the Supreme Court is still in business or whether the Supreme Court is just a bad joke, because that's the current schedule for ruling, for all intents and purposes, 45 to 60 days on whether this guy, is entitled to say that the president of the United States can kill somebody and is completely immune from anything in the world. I don't think they'll, even these guys, even these morons on the Supreme Court now, will do that. So I'm hopeful about that. But what really bothers me is that, I've been involved in administration of some of these things, and what we don't understand, if you look back to the Gore-Bush election, you realize that our elections are completely time bound. And by that, I mean that, if you're a guy who shuts the power down at all the voting booths in the inner city, by the time somebody gets an injunction and goes into court where they discover that all the mid-level federal judges now are Republicans, and get some kind of relief, the election will be over. I mean, they're not going to redo anything. So I'm really nervous that we'll have a period of time of, vigilante interference with election activities that will have no help from the courts, because the courts will say, well, our procedures, take 3 weeks for briefing this. I mean, this is what's happening with this woman, this idiot judge in Florida, who is stalling the classified documents examination. And that's even before this latest, gigantic, a book that was like the size of a suitcase disappeared. So yeah, I'm very fearful that
This is this is the file, a missing file.
Yeah, the Russian files, but it's described as 10 or 12 inches tall, and a bunch of raw intelligence from all over from all over our systems, with no, information blotted out or anything like that. And frankly, judging by the unbelievably particularized comment that was made by Meadows' attorney, I think Meadows may have taken the book out of the White House. He may have the book, because they went out of their way to say that he didn't take any copies of that book out of the White House. So I'm like, all right, well, so he took the original, fine, it's missing, But in any event, I'm concerned that that Trump could be, reelected. And again, you can't be a lawyer, you can't believe in our systems when a guy says, and by the way, after his next 4 years, he'll decide whether he should stay in office. This is what he said yesterday, whether he should stay in office after another 4 years because he was cheated out of, his prior opportunity to do that or something. This guy is functionally insane. Some of the things he's saying, but the media doesn't seem to, they've become so inured to his craziness that they treat it as just, oh, okay, well, that's just Trump saying these things. But he could be the next president. And I also think that it's very sad about Biden. I regard the Biden situation as very much akin to Ginsburg. Ginsburg should have gotten off the court. The Democrats don't have a second tier. Let me close this door. My dogs are calling. The we don't have a bench. The Democrats really don't have a bench, and so it's a little scary, because I think a number of people think Biden is doing a perfectly fine job. I think he is. I think what he's accomplished is amazing. That hasn't percolated through to much of anybody. I do a lot of this speaking, and I just finished a whole series of talks in Florida, and it is a different planet. You go down there and it's a different planet. And they listen to Trump say that the economy was the best it ever was and all these things. And it's horrible now, and inflation's crazy, and we should drill for oil. And if we had drilled for oil, Russia would be back on its heels, and Iran wouldn't have any money, and, we wouldn't have anything going on in Israel and all these things. So I don't know. I'm scared that we could end up with this guy back in office. And I think we're in a situation where it's very difficult, because people, I think, are just as wary of the prospect that if something happened to Biden in office, that we could end up with somebody that no one believes is capable of doing the job, or no one would want to do the job. So
Do you really think that Vice President Harris is not capable? I've always
I do. I mean, she barely, I mean, when you talk about capability, I would say two things. One, I would say a test of whether the country is interested in her was she didn't even survive like the first of the primaries and in the process the last time she tried to do this. And I don't think I mean, sadly, I don't think anything she has done in the ensuing 2.5 years or whatever it is. And she got some of the stupidest, toughest assignments out there. I understand that, go fix the border, go do, I mean, so nobody did her a favor. But I think that nobody is interested in the prospect that she would ever become the president. And I don't, look, we have now our second mayor in Chicago who is grossly incompetent, had no prior experience, and we're learning that when you have somebody who has no prior experience, who's never run a business, who somehow got into office, that things can go terribly wrong. And I think we're seeing that in Chicago, and this is the second time around. So I think, I think that's just a fact. I think that she's a perfectly nice person. And I think that nobody wants her to be in the position where she would be the next, the next president. And by the way, I mean, if I were advising Biden, and I was very close to Clinton, I was, a vice chairman of the Clinton Foundation for years, and very involved with them, and still am. I see him regularly. But if I were advising Biden, I think I would say that he should indicate that there would be an open nomination process at the Democratic convention, which is coming up in a few months in Chicago. And whoever the nominee was, that would be the Democrats' nomination, nominee. And
an open process for vice president?
no, for president. I mean, in other words, I think he should say, I think he should say that he would take a step back and have it be open. As long as it was open, then I think the democratic systems can decide. But if not, I don't know what's going to happen. I really am wary of it, and it's not a happy situation. Plus, I think this Israel situation is terribly complicated, and I think it's making it 1,000 times harder on him and on various portions of the Democratic combined party.
Given that it looks like he's going to have to cut a deal to get on the border on immigration to get aid for Ukraine and Israel passed. Do you have any, enough knowledge to talk about the border policy and where we've been at this for a long time?
Look, I think, well, first of all, let me say, I mentioned Chicago. I mean, we have the Democratic convention coming. I would expect that the Republican governors will be falling all over themselves to ship us another 100 or 200,000 migrants, before the convention, in order to make Chicago the worst example of the immigrant crisis of any major urban city. That's A. B, I think that Biden. There's no good answer to the immigration thing. I mean, I think we cannot have an open border, and I think that we're seeing it. We're seeing it in Chicago. We're seeing it in every major city. New York is it's insane what's going on, and so my bigger concern is that the Republicans, the people who are presently in Congress on the Republican side, they don't have any interest in doing anything, anything other than making it miserable. So that Trump becomes a more realistic prospect of winning. And I don't know. I can't keep track. Have they gone home, or have they not gone home? Or did they?
I think the House went home. I think the Senate might still be around.
Yeah.
So you think they're just anarchy? Well, they're kind of purposeful anarchists. They're trying to bring things to a standstill so that Trump gets in. And
I think that's the general look. I think that there are performative bomb throwers in the House, and to a limited extent in the Senate. I mean, there's 30 or 40 of these guys, mostly guys, on both sides. And if you go back to January 6th, I mean, those are the exact same people voting to not approve the election, to interfere with the entire process. Not one of them has been accused of anything, but I mean, I believe, and I really do believe that Jack Smith has and is continuing to accumulate information that a number of these people were in the White House. They were in some of these meetings. I mean, they decided to only indict Trump, although they have 5 or 6, unindicted co-conspirators. I don't know whether there'll be a reckoning. I suspect that if Trump doesn't get in, that the Jack Smith's investigations will continue and will eventually reach into some of these scumbags who were Republicans, who were absolutely, part of the process. And by the way, I mean, the process is a mechanical process. I mean, if there was no decision in the House, it would have gone, to a vote, and they have more states than the Democrats, and that would have controlled the election. I mean, that mechanism, nobody was making that up. I mean, that's the crazy mechanism that we have. That's the crazy mechanism that Wyoming has as much sway in the Senate as California does, as much sway in the Electoral College as any other organization. And that's just what we're stuck with. And I don't know that we'll ever see that change.
Right. Okay, so
Yeah.
Howard, leave us with the upbeat Howard.
Yeah.
The give us some holiday cheer here. It's almost Christmas. Send us off with the good scenario, the bright scenario.
Well, look, I think that I think that technology is going to permit us, and this is again, I mean, COVID was horrible and we lost, lives and everything else, but the lesson about distributed work, I mean, it leapfrogged the gig economy, which I think was a fraud on a lot of people driving Ubers who think they're making a living and don't understand depreciation. But I think we leapfrogged over to a new economic model that's going to change so many things in the way we operate and so many things in the way we live. But we'll have to. People ask me all the time, how much reading I do and things like that, and my answer is, it's impossible to stay up in all of the art world, so we focus on an area. It's impossible to stay up in politics, so we focus on certain things. So I think everybody's going to have to learn how to filter the information they're taking in, and then how to validate it as well. Some of that will be done with technology tools. But I think, and I don't know exactly that it's a blessing, but I mean, I think we're all living longer. I think we have our arms around some interesting challenges and solutions for some of the biggest health problems that we have. But I think we have other emergent health problems that are of our own making. I mean, if you look at, I think the best investment you could make today, and as I say, I go to these financial conferences all the time, and the crowd was like booing me when I said that the LP-1 drugs are clearly going to be, in the next few years, the best possible investment you could make. I mean, Ozempic and these things are life-changing. I mean, when you have Oprah telling her, 100 billion fans that she gave up on Weight Watchers and everything else, and she just took the shots, and lo and behold, she's lost 73 pounds and is healthier. Who knows what the side effects are. But that drug culture, I mean, that's a very interesting thing. I mean, obesity is the most costly disease we have in this country. It's the biggest threat to our kids coming up, other than maybe football. And I think that some of that is going to be really beneficial, and I'm excited about it. And on the other hand, I don't know how we're going to regulate it if we don't have a structure that we can trust. I mean, I think, the less Congress accomplishes in some respects is probably the best we can expect for, because they're just clowns. I mean, the fact that this Tuberville guy, held up hundreds of people's lives, not just the promotions. They couldn't move their kids. They couldn't relocate their family. The kids didn't know where they were going to go to school. I mean, 400 military officers, one clown. And by the way, it wasn't even a rule. It's not a law. It was some custom that these idiots in Congress decided, well, next time, maybe I'll get to be the one who gets to hold the president's, feet to the fire. So I don't want to give up on this privilege. And that's what's true of all the stuff on the nominations. You have senators using the blue slips to hold up on judicial nominations. You have these idiots, dealing with administrative offices. It's hard. It's hard to be a happy camper right now. I don't know. I wish I could give you better news. Hanukkah is over.
Okay. Well, listen, thank you so much. This has been a fascinating conversation. Let's stay in touch. I'm just going to stop recording, but I do want to and Merry Christmas.
Same to you. We'll talk soon.